And welcome back to another episode of Containers on the Couch. It's great to have you everybody back. I'm joined today with a guest who probably doesn't need any introduction. He's been with us a couple of times, but I will still leave you the honors, Efe, to introduce yourself and please tell us who you are and why you're here today.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Mesh. First of all, I love being on this show. Every time it's very fun. Customers asking us questions on how exactly ECS works or AWS Copilot works. So I'm glad to be on here again. So hi everyone. I'm Efe. I'm a senior engineer on the Amazon ECS developer experience team, and more specifically, my team and I we work on the AWS Copilot CLI. And that's a brief introduction about me.
Awesome. And my name is Silo Casing. I'm a developer advocate with the ECS service team. And welcome everybody joining us. Everybody also in chat. We would love to hear your thoughts and questions. So please don't be shy. Let us know what you would like to help us. I see, is that Sergey at the bottom over there as well, who was supposed to be with us today, but he is not. It looks like it. Yes. So welcome, Sergey. Thank you for joining us from the stream. Should have had you here as well. So Efe, what are we going to be talking about today? I see something behind your left shoulder. Is it that left shoulder, this one?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so that's right. So we'll be talking about the AWS Copilot CLI, and more specifically, the latest release that we launched 2 weeks ago, I think, version 1.27. So my goal over here is to really give a brief overview of what Copilot is, and then switch over to do hands-on demos of all the new features we introduced in version 1.27 and why we built them.
Awesome. Okay. So firstly, everybody might be the first time they're joining us from Containers from the Couch. So firstly, what is Copilot? It's not the other product Copilot, which some people might think about of GitHub, but what is AWS or Amazon Copilot? It's AWS Copilot, correct? Yeah.
That's right.
So it's AWS Copilot.
So I just shared my screen to display the AWS Copilot CLI's website. So this AWS Copilot is a command line interface that's open source. So we're available on GitHub. Please feel free to reach out to us on GitHub issues, GitHub discussions. Our team is super active on there, try to talk to you all and answer questions that you might have. But our goal, the CLI's goal, is to make it super easy for developers to build, release, and operate production-ready containerized applications on Amazon ECS, AWS Fargate, as well as AWS App Runner.
Okay.
So to illustrate that, instead of going into the website and kind of showcasing everything that's capable from Copilot, I built a very basic, super simple Node.js application using the Copilot CLI. And what I'll do is that I'll show the interface of what is the experience like building this application with Copilot.
Okay.
So just to illustrate a little bit, if it's visible at all, but what I've launched is
bigger. If you could make the screen a tiny bit, if that'll be okay.
I don't know if I can make the top of the browser bigger.
Top bars. That's cool.
The text, there isn't anything fancy over here in the text, but the more interesting aspect is that here I have a domain that I've purchased separately, right? It could be purchased on Route 53 or any other ways that you would like to buy your domain. But I purchased Efe Karakus test.com. And with Copilot, I've created an HTTPS service, as well as assigning a subdomain shop.efekarakus.test.com. And this routes it to an application load balancer, and then to an ECS on Fargate service. And the cool thing is that what we'll see is that Copilot handle all the infrastructure that's needed over here, from creating SSL certificates to attaching it to the application load balancer to creating the ECS service. So to illustrate that, let me switch over directly.
Before you, so just again, this is a CLI tool which will pretty much do all the things in the background for you. You don't have to know how to deploy a VPC. You won't have to set up the routing. You won't have to set up the load balancer. All those things will automatically be handled based on the input you provide to Copilot. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So,
awesome.
And then
to make life a lot easier for people that don't know all those things in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that you don't even need, you might even know these things. And anybody that has written CloudFormation templates or Terraform modules, you can see like how repetitive some of the aspects are, like recreating a VPC, recreating an application load balancer, setting up listener rules. There's still a lot of context here that you have to constantly go back to the docs, look up how these things are done.
Right.
Copilot packages already all these templates for you under the hood. So it's a lot more convenient. What one of the aspects that Copilot brings is that it makes it very convenient to get started with an architecture from the get-go. So what I'll do is that instead of the browser, let me quickly switch over to a different screen, to Visual Studio Code. So I can just illustrate how this works. Windows. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so exactly what Mesh was saying earlier is that with Copilot, once I've deployed my shop application, this is the interface that you would get at the end. Copilot generates these manifest files for you, which is infrastructure as code. So you can put it in your Git repository, you can commit it, you can get it code reviewed. The more important aspect is that the CLI, these infrastructure as code files, rather than defining the low-level AWS resources, it tries to represent entire architectures from the get-go. So for example, I'm saying that I'm building a coffee shop service and it's internet facing, so it's a load balance web service. The only thing that I have to specify is that if I've purchased already a domain, in this situation, I have purchased this particular domain, I just give an alias. I say, hey, I want my service to get shop.efekarakustest.com. So here's my subdomain for my service. I specify the path, some basic health check settings. I can point a lot. So if I'm working from a Git repository, I can point to a local Docker file. So over here under source, I have my simple Node.js Docker file here for my application.
Yeah.
I give the path. I tell which ports is exposed in this Docker file. Actually, you don't even need to specify that with Copilot because Copilot will parse this Docker file, check for expose instructions, and automatically fill out this manifest for you when you're initializing the service. And then at the end, at the bottom over here, I have some very basic container settings. Right? So these are how big should be my Fargate's task size? How many Fargate tasks do I want for ECS to create? Should I be enabling ECS exec or ECS Service Connect? So these more advanced features, they are also available in the manifest. I just put them there to illustrate a little bit what a more advanced manifest file could look like. But the point here is that there is the interface that you end up interacting with does not contain anything related to an application load balancer or really an ECS service. It's more about, hey, this is the architecture that I want in HTTP property as well as my domain, and then Copilot will create all the resources for you.
Nice.
So to illustrate that, let me open up the terminal here. I'll clear my terminal. I'll make it a bit bigger. So the manifest file that we saw earlier for the load balance web service, we provide, actually, let me just type Copilot so you can see what the CLI does. So if I type Copilot, this is the help menu that you get. It's a CLI to help you launch and manage containerized applications on AWS. You can see that we provide a lot of commands. We try to categorize them so you have some getting started commands such as Copilot init. Once you become a bit more familiar with Copilot and you want to take control of the individual resources, we'll provide the application command, environment command, service, schedule jobs, as well as releasing. So deploying, you can deploy manually through the CLI, or you can set up a continuous delivery pipeline with Copilot. So we'll provide a pipeline command, as well as extending the CLI with additional CloudFormation templates. But what I wanted to show over here is that this manifest file that we had created over here, if you would like to see what this looks like in terms of CloudFormation, we provide this command called Copilot Service Package. So
and this was something which existed before 127, or
that's right. So everything that I'm going to demoing right now is the world of Copilot before version 1.27. So all these features already existed. And I'm going to illustrate what else we added in 1.27. But yeah, so the architecture, you can see that the generated CloudFormations template under the hood, the domain that we had passed in the manifest file is passed down into the CloudFormation templates. So these manifest files are just abstractions on top of CloudFormation templates.
Okay.
And you can see how a lot of this complexity, such as knowing listener rules, setting up multiple listener rules with redirects, creating an ACM certificate, assigning priorities to your listeners, as well as abstracting target groups or the ECS task definition or the ECS service. This is all handled by Copilot. Yeah. So this is in terms of just building your application, like building your architecture. But the Copilot CLI is a toolkit for your entire development lifecycle. So my preferred command, the one that I really enjoy, is that I don't have to go to, I don't have to use the AWS CLI or go to the ECS console to view some basic statistics about my ECS service. So I can run the Copilot service status command, and that'll give me how many tasks are currently running. So that's one, and how many of them are healthy. So the 1 out of 1 is healthy. It gives me my basic task ID. We provide the Copilot service show command to be able to view some basic configuration settings about your service. So I can see that, okay, the deployed Fargate task is indeed matching my manifest configuration. Here is the URL for my application. Here are the endpoints that's available to me through ECS Service Connect or Service Discovery, the values of the environment variables that are injected into my container. All of these are available through the service show command. Let me see, what are some other exciting commands that we have? Oh,
and while this is directly querying, of course, the ECS API in real time.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. We'll query the ECS API, we'll query CloudFormation, or for example, with this command, if I type Copilot service logs, so there isn't anything exciting here because I'm not logging anything in my application, unfortunately, but we will be querying CloudWatch logs, right? So we'll go
for the containers and the tasks which are running, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have to go into a different console to be able to view the logs of my service. I can tail the logs from the terminal. And my favorite actually troubleshooting command is integrating with ECS exec. So I can type Copilot service exec and directly connect into the container that's running part of my task. So over here, I can start viewing the files and help me troubleshoot. So for example, if I type curl, I can access resources. I can access other endpoints in my VPC through the Fargate task that's running. Yeah, so that was the state of the world for before 1.27. And the important thing is that before I switch over to what we just released, is that let me go back to the browser and just showcase a little bit about these advanced settings that we have in these manifest files.
Okay.
So if I go back to the browser, okay, the important part is that
make it bigger. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, cool. So yeah, in our documentation, for every type of service that we provide, whether that's a load balance web service, a scheduled job, or maybe you want a containerized ECS service that's pulling events from an SQS queue, we provide these various different manifest files. And in the documentation, you can see the specification for these architecture types. And so to grow your application, you would start with Copilot init, and it will generate these manifest files. But to grow, you would edit these manifest files and add any of these properties that you want. And we try to go pretty in-depth here for any field that might be relevant for a load balance web service. So you can see that we provide several health check settings surfaced here. Again, like domain-related settings, you can create a network load balancer, a lot of how to build your container settings, auto-scaling, as well as supporting Windows tasks. you name it.
So pretty much whatever ECS or Fargate currently provide today, you can do with inside Copilot.
Yeah, well, not everything actually. So we try to cover almost the most popular cases with Copilot manifests. And your question is a perfect transition into version 1.27. So what I'm going to do.
I promise you, we didn't practice this before. It was a truly an honest question about if it covered everything. But yes, it is a good transition. Yeah, so go for it.
Yeah, so just to illustrate your question, Mesh, like for example, in the deployment settings that Copilot provides, we provide two modes. You could say, for the minimum healthy percent and maximum percent settings that ECS provides, we default to 100 and 200, or we provide another option for 0 and 100. But we didn't allow people to be able to write their own custom values, such as 33% and 200%, something like that.
Why would somebody want to do that, for example?
It just depends completely on their architecture. The deployment setting isn't a great example, but for example, the load balancers have several settings, such as idle timeout, like how long to hold the connection before closing it. We defaulted to 60 seconds, but there are very much situations where you might need to hold these connections for longer than 60 seconds, depending on your application. So those were valid use cases. And prior to version 1.27, if you needed to modify a property in the existing CloudFormation templates, you would cut an issue to Copilot and ask if the field could be supported. But instead of doing that now, our first feature that we released in 1.27 is being able to extend the abstracted CloudFormation templates by Copilot. So we added the functionality, a new command called the override command that allows you to extend these CloudFormation templates by just adding your own little YAML patch overrides, or you could use the AWS Cloud Development Kit, the CDK, to actually extend Copilot. So I think this is a good transition to try to demo that. Does it sound good?
So let me just understand, for example, we said we have our same defaults, which we provide with inside Copilot. Our customers, of course, came to us and say, okay, we love the same defaults, but we would also like the option, if we need to customize those things.
Exactly.
And the override is exactly what gives them this possibility.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So before 1.27, we had this functionality called add-ons, which allowed you to add any additional resources, any other AWS resources. Let's say that you wanted to add an S3 bucket or integrate with Amazon OpenSearch. You could do that before 1.27 with add-ons, but we did not have the functionality to override and extend an existing property, an existing resource.
Okay.
Yeah. So to illustrate that,
I have a question for you then, for example, because I'm sure we're going to get into this afterwards. So what would be the difference for a customer? Say, you just said if I can do an add-on by adding an S3 bucket or an OpenSearch cluster.
Yep.
And if I understand the fact with overrides, I could in theory also provide an override to do those things through this functionality.
Yeah.
So which one would a customer choose to do? Or what would be the better, I would say, the considerations for them to choose one over the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that if you want to just add strictly new resources, I would highly recommend going the add-on route. And we can illustrate that later if we have time. Just because add-ons, Copilot actually takes over a lot of wiring that you would need to do yourself otherwise with overrides. So for example, if you were to add an IAM policy as an add-on, a managed policy as an add-on, or you created security groups, Copilot parses the template that you're writing, the CloudFormation template that you're writing, and automatically add the IAM managed policy, automatically add your secrets, your security groups to the ECS service or to your task role. Does that make sense? So it allows you to integrate a bit better, or it alleviates the need for you to then, after defining the resource, to also modify the ECS resources to connect.
Understood.
Yeah, exactly. With overrides, you could, like you said, you can definitely do that too, but you would have to do the modification yourself.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Cool. So just to illustrate, I'll go back to the example that I gave Mesh earlier. Let me open up the terminal here. Okay. So what we're going to do is that Copilot, for my little shop application, we created this application load balancer, and we defaulted for there's a setting on application load balancers called idle timeout. The default that Copilot sets is just 60 seconds, and we're going to make a modification over there to change it to 30 seconds. So this property is not surfaced on manifest files, and it's a perfect candidate for using overrides. So what I'm going to do is that you could override. So I'm going to type just to illustrate, I'm going to type the new override command, Copilot environment override. And we can see that we provide two flavors for how you would like to write your override. I'm going to start off, instead of using the CDK, I'm going to start off with YAML patch overrides. And if I type a question mark, Copilot will give me like an explanation of when you should use which.
Okay.
The CDK is the preferred approach if you want to leverage the expressive power of a programming language, if you need that additional power while writing for loops of if statements. But the trade-off is that now you're not just using Copilot, you also need to learn a little bit about how to write CDK applications, right? On the other hand, YAML patch, it doesn't have the same expressiveness as a programming language that you could leverage like with the CDK, but it makes it super easy if you want to do like a small modification, such as just adding an idle timeout. My recommendation would be just to go with YAML patch. It's very easy to insert a little bit of CloudFormation YAML template into the Copilot template. So that's what we're going to start off with over here. Okay. So I'll say, yep, I want to choose YAML patch, and then you can see that the CLI is telling me that I created a patch file in this particular location. We also create a README explaining exactly, what we're doing and the steps to take over here. So
okay.
Let me open up the file to illustrate what's going on. Is that with a patch file, so I'll comment these out. One thing that the structure of the patch files is that you tell, okay, for example, you give an operation that you want to apply to the CloudFormation template, such as removing a particular resource or removing a particular property. So in this first example, I'm saying, hey, remove the ECS task role. Or, I can add a different property. So I can take the existing Service Connect configuration that Copilot creates, and I can add some additional settings in here, or I could replace a property. So this is the three different levels of operations that we provide with YAML patch overrides. And I'm going to comment all those out because I'm just interested in adding idle timeout. Let me switch over really quick to my little piece of code that I have and copy paste that onto my IDE. Okay, cool. So here, this is the example that we're going to use. I'm saying that I want to add a new property into my application load balancer. So Copilot has this resource called a public load balancer. I want to modify the load balancer attributes. And instead of the default of 60 seconds, I want to change that value to 30 seconds.
Okay.
It's as basic as that. So that's, once I make this modification, the way that you can test whether the feature is working or not is I'll go back to the terminal, and my recommendation is actually to type Copilot env package. And in version 1.27, we added a new flag for all the package commands as well as deploy commands --diff. So this allows you to visualize just the difference between what's deployed in CloudFormation, like what's actually live in your AWS account versus what you're proposing with your local changes in your Git repository. So if I type Copilot env package --diff, you can see that, let me make this a bit cleaner. Okay, so you can see that we have two changes that's happening. One is we're updating the description of the template. This is not very important, but it's saying that, okay, your CloudFormation template is now overwritten with YAML patches. But the more important aspect is that you can see that the load balancer attributes property was added into the CloudFormation template with the new value. So if I wanted to deploy this now, I can just type Copilot and deploy, and I'm going to use the --diff flag again. So yeah, it's printing the exact same information, and then it's asking me if I want to continue with the deployment. I'm going to say yes. And you can see that it's proposing the changes to CloudFormation.
In the background, this scene what essentially is synthesizing a CloudFormation template locally and then creating a stack set or a change set on the CloudFormation template, which you've already deployed.
Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So we'll generate the CloudFormation template and then call create change set and then apply the change set into the CloudFormation stack. So you can see the change set operation succeeded earlier, and now it's actually updating the load balancer with the idle timeout setting. We print out like a nice visual representation of the resources that are being updated, and the CloudFormation stack updated within 14 seconds.
Cool.
Yep. So that was an illustration of override with YAML patches. And what I'm going to switch over now is that I'll demo a very similar situation, but instead I'm going to use now the CDK as my mechanism to override the CloudFormation template.
And before you start, a very quick 60-second thing of what is AWS CDK, the Cloud Development Kit, for our viewers who are not 100% acquainted with it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the CDK is an infrastructure as code tool that's developed by AWS, and it's an abstraction on top of CloudFormation. And instead of writing CloudFormation templates in JSON or in YAML, you can leverage the expressive power of programming languages to define these templates. So, for example, I can use TypeScript, I can use Python, I can use Java. And instead of writing YAML files, I would have these nice CDK constructs, these CDK objects that allow me to render into a CloudFormation template. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to delete the overrides directory that was created for my environment over here. So because I don't want to use YAML patches, I want to use environment overrides with CDK. So I'm gonna switch back to the terminal. Let me make this bigger. I'm gonna run the exact same command. I want to override the CloudFormation template for my environment where my application load balancer is. But this time I'm gonna choose the CDK. So the first thing that we do is when we choose the CDK, to make it very easy for you to import the necessary libraries and to make modifications, we'll parse your CloudFormation template and then display over here the resources that are available for you to override. So you can see that the Elastic IP addresses, NAT gateway, the route table, any of these properties are accessible and you can override it using the CDK. But in this situation, I'm interested in the load balancer. So let me type public load balancer. Should be somewhere here. Yep. So the last item is my load balancer, and I'm deciding to overwrite that. Then I press enter. So you can see that I'm going to overwrite this particular resource. And just like before, the output is exactly the same. It's just telling me that under environments, we created this overrides directory that contains a CDK application. So if if anybody in the audience has already used the CDK before, they should be very familiar with the structure. There isn't anything new. It's a regular CDK application. And the only interesting piece really that's available over here is that when you chose the public load balancer, we automatically created the right import statements as well as package.json to say that, okay, we're going to import the Elastic Load Balancer, and we're going to make modifications what we need to do as a user is just to implement this particular function called the transform public load balancer method. So to make that a bit easier to follow, I'm going to go back to the terminal. And the first thing that I'm going to do is navigate to this environment directory. And I'm going to type npm install so that I can download the CDK and get this nice auto completion as well as type safety in my Visual Studio Code.
Cool.
And while this is happening, let me just take the code that I have written earlier, and I can copy paste that into this file.
Cool. And while we're waiting, I just want to welcome all the viewers that have joined us since the beginning. We're talking today about the Copilot 127 release. I'm here with Efe. My name is Meish. And Efe is now going to demo how we do a override with CDK, which is a new feature available within the Copilot 127 release.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, my goal as a developer that wants to change any of the load balancer settings is to implement this transform public load balancer method. And if you're lost about this, please don't worry about it. In the README, we give nice instructions exactly on like what are all these files that are created in the CDK application, know which file you need to modify, and the only file that you need to modify is the stack.typescript file.
Okay.
And we also like try to demystify what's going on over here by explaining what happens under the hood between the CDK and Copilot. And we provide additional guides. So if you go on our website, we have several examples of using overrides with the CDK or YAML patches. Okay, so let me go back to the stack file over here, and I'm gonna copy paste my code from that I've written earlier. So if I go this, yep. So let me just walk you through this piece of code that I have written earlier. Is that first we grab the public load balancer, and what I want to do, one of the nice things that you can write with the CDK is that I can say that, hey, if the environment that I'm deploying is a test environment, I can give a value of 300 seconds, for example, for the idle timeout. But if it's a production environment or if I have several production environments, I can give different values. And the CDK makes it super easy to write this. So that's exactly what this piece of code does, is that I take the idle timeout. If it's test that I'm deploying to, I set it to 300. And then at the bottom, I get to override the load balancer attributes field by creating
with that value of 300 or 30, whatever it may be,
yeah,
depending on the
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And then if I go back to Copilot, to the CLI, and just like before, if I type the Copilot env package command with --diff, what the Copilot CLI is going to do is that it's going to call CDK synth under the hood. So the first thing that Copilot does is generate its own CloudFormation template starting from the manifest file. Then it passes the generated CloudFormation template into the CDK, which allows the CDK to overwrite any of the properties, and then we call CDK synth under the hood. So the reason why --diff is giving us all these different modifications over here is that the CDK renders. You can see that the style that it renders with is slightly different.
It's slightly different,
than Copilot does. But if I scroll slightly up over here, we should eventually get to the public load balancer. Oh, yeah, exactly. So here in the public load balancer, you can see that the load balancer attribute setting was previously 30, which we had overwritten it with YAML patch. And now with the CDK, we're changing it to 300, and you can see that being displayed. So
I have a question for you. Before you ran the same command, which was Copilot env package --diff, and it read the changes from the YAML file.
That's
you now ran the same command exactly without defining that it was CDK, and it pulled the changes that we're doing from the CDK. How did it know to switch between one and the other?
Oh, so what I did, maybe that wasn't clear earlier, is that I deleted the YAML.
Oh, you deleted the previous one?
Yeah, I deleted the previous one. So I deleted.
Okay, so I'm going to give you what happens if you have two different kinds? What's it going to do?
We don't allow it. So you'll get an error saying that, hey, please
perfect.
use either YAML patch overrides or CDK overrides for you. for overriding your CloudFormation template.
Cool. Saves confusion from people. Perfect.
Okay, so and just to like drive it into completion, I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna type Copilot amp deploy with --diff. So this will allow me to deploy the CDK generated template. My goal is just to show that this does indeed succeed deployment. And so it first run CDK synth, it prints the difference again over here, and I type, yes, I want to continue with the deployment. And then it's going to create the change set again with CloudFormation, call the update stack with the change set, or execute the change sets, sorry. And yeah, and my new 300 setting should be applied.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So the good, as we said, the benefit of using a CDK, it's a fully qualified, you can use any fully qualified programming language which you're used to today. Gives you a lot more flexibility, like you say, for doing like if-else scenarios that you did before, which I assume we could have done somehow also in the YAML, but it wouldn't have been so simple.
Yeah, exactly.
But
you could do it in the YAML. So in just to the idle timeout example that I'm showing is actually a customer issue that we got last week. They asked us, hey, how can I configure? So this is exactly what we built with, we gave them this sample example with the CDK or with YAML patch overrides. And with YAML patch, instead of writing, you don't have the flexibility of writing if statements. So if you're familiar with CloudFormation, you would use CloudFormation conditions as well as mappings to achieve the same thing. But the ergonomics, like how easy it is to write that it's easier to write an if statement with the CDK than defining mappings. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the deployment succeeded, and that was basically what I wanted to show with extending Copilot using the new override command with the CDK or with YAML patches. And just to like reiterate that we provide this override functionality both for services, service CloudFormation templates, job CloudFormation templates, as well as environment templates.
So we had a question from the chat, which I don't know if you can answer. I'm not sure I can either. The question was, how can we use AWS CDK in a mono repo? Do you have any idea or maybe a resource? If not, then if you don't have anything, I'll ask Barracuda L to give me a ping directly after the show. My Twitter handle is here on the screen. Give me a ping and I'll find a good answer for you for a good resource if we don't have one.
That sounds good. So I cannot answer it like off the top of my head. I just know that we have an AWS blog that exactly covers this topic. So I can try to find that and then send it over to you, Manish, afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Efe.
Okay, so the rest of the discussion, we've seen how to extend Copilot with the new overrides functionality. What I wanted to show is just to give an overview of some additional features that we have introduced in version 1.27. So besides extending templates, the main one that I'm really excited about is actually two different features that we have added, but how they interact together, I think is really fun. So the first thing is that for your load balancer, previously Copilot only allowed you to specify a single path. So or like a single listener rule. So you will be able to say, hey, I want only shop.efekarakus.test.com to go into my main container, which is at this, and then build the main container using this Docker file path. Okay. Now, what we have done is that we added this new property called additional rules. And you can find this all in our documentation as well as the blog for version 1.27, illustrating how to use these new fields. But with additional rules, I can say, hey, I want the new subdomain admin.efekarakus.test.com to go to a different container. So shop will go to my main container, and then admin will go to a new sidecar container called admin. So I specified the target container to be admin. So to do that, I'm going to also uncomment this line saying that I want to add, besides building the main container, I want to also build a sidecar container image. And here is the path to my sidecar container. So under source, I have admin, another Node.js application, and it's exposing port 9000. So after I make this modification, I can go to Copilot, and just like before, there's no modification over here, but I can type the Copilot service deploy command, and I'm going to use this new feature again, --diff. It's my favorite feature of 1.27. So if I type this, I can see what are the changes that Copilot is going to do before, like to CloudFormation, before deploying this new architecture. And you can see that what it's doing right now is that it's building my sidecar container image, and then it's going to push that to an ECR repository. Once that's done, we should get a print of the CloudFormation diff, and the deployment should start happening. So because it's a Node.js app, you can see it's slightly big. So this the container image building takes a little bit of time.
And if you have any questions for us on the chat, or on who's ever watching the stream, either on YouTube or on Twitch, please let us know through the chat. We'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So you can see that the image is done building, and now it's pushing the image. It's 500 megabytes, so that's going to take quite some time. But in the meantime, what I can do is that, just to give an overview of what this admin container does, is that in the main coffee shop application, when we were visiting the website, what we did was, let me close my terminal. What we did was, every time that you will get a request at the root, besides printing welcome to Efe's coffee shop, I will start counting in memory the number of page visits. And the admin container, what it does is that once we'll go to admin.efekarakus.com, we will print I'll be able to make a request on localhost to the number of visits, get the number of visits, and print that onto
so a counter essentially for this case, just to see how many people have gone to your site.
Exactly. And the important piece over here is that these two containers, like this admin container is the sidecar container, and then the coffee shop is its own container, and they talk to each other over localhost. So that's mainly what I wanted to show. So if I open up the terminal, okay, cool. So you can see that the image was pushed properly, and we display in the diff. Let me actually make this a bit bigger. All the changes that we're going to do. So you can see in the container definition, we are adding a brand new item, the admin container. We are making changes to the target group. We're adding, let me see, what else is there? Yeah, a new listener rule, that's the main part, right? We're saying that admin should go now to the admin container.
The new container and the new port.
Yep. And I'll say yes to continue the deployment. I don't know if you want to wait necessarily for the deployment to finish, but you'll see now that during the deployment, we'll update these listener rules, and we'll request a new certificate to also add admin.mydomain onto the load balancer. And all these steps, I think, will take around 5 minutes for it to complete.
So you go 1 second back. You said you automatically, as part of the process, when we provision it through Copilot, you also do the certificate provisioning through ACM, through the validation, through DNS and Round 53.
Exactly.
All those things are done automatically as part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you can see that happening right now in front of us. So you can see that we're requesting an ACM certificate for your domain. So we're making modifications in CloudFormation to create a new certificate resource. But the interesting piece is that afterwards, even if you request a certificate, that you cannot attach it directly to your application load balancer. You need to first validate that the certificate is owned by you. If the domain and the certificate matches.
Correct.
So we will automatically add these validation records that are associated with your certificate to the Route 53 hosted zone, and we'll validate it for you. So
cool.
Copilot does all of this within CloudFormation. We create these custom resources to be able to handle that particular logic. And then afterwards, it's just regular CloudFormation deployments. We connect all these different resources together.
So you guys are making this too easy for everybody. I'm sorry.
But I'm glad to hear that. That's the whole point of Copilot. So
Exactly.
yeah, so that's mainly what I wanted to show today. Besides extending with Copilot, using now with the CDK or YAML patch overrides, so you can fully customize its CloudFormation templates. If a property is not surfaced by Copilot, you are no longer blocked. Copilot allowed you to provide, you can get started in a very simple and convenient way with the Copilot init command. You can grow pretty much in depth. We have a lot of customers that are not using any overrides. And the manifest files and all the properties that are provided on the website is perfectly enough for a lot of customers. But if you do end up in a situation where a particular field is no longer surfaced, you can use the override fields and unblock yourself. And for convenience, we have added also these additional rules that you can set up. You can build your container images now with the image build property through version 1.27. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you very much, Efe. So I assume that most of our customers or people that I used to work with as when I was part of the account teams, if you had a question, you either had to open up a support ticket or speak to your account team. Copilot is slightly different because it's an open source project. So how can somebody ask the Copilot team a question?
Yeah. So let me just go back to the website to just showcase real examples of this. So as mentioned earlier, Copilot is an open source command line interface. We're available on GitHub, so github.com/AWS/Copilot-CLI. And please feel free to cut us any issues. If you're running into, it could be anything from feature requests to bugs to if just asking guidance questions. So for example, none of these are created by the team. They are all users of Copilot, and we try to tag them and answer these questions as much as we can. So you can see for this particular user, my teammate Danny was sitting right there, just answered this yesterday and just 2 hours ago. So we try to be super active on here and try to answer your questions in depth. So GitHub issues is one possible route. Discussions, that's totally okay too. Either one of them, we try to answer them. And lastly, if you scroll to the README, if you don't feel comfortable creating issues and would like to just chat with us directly with an instant messaging tool, so we're also on Gitter, sorry. So if you click the Gitter link, you can see again over here, you can just chat with us, and just like earlier, you can see that Danny replied just a bit, today to this particular customer with their question. So
awesome.
Yeah, this will be
so you guys are pretty much available throughout the day, all the day, and hopefully you get some sleep on the weekends.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we during the day we're definitely super active on GitHub, and we try to get back to you as soon as we're back on our computers. Yeah.
Perfect. If our customer, you say the issues of the fact of proposing any questions or asking for new features, is there a roadmap of some sorts of what Copilot is working on, what's coming up in the next few? Firstly, how often do you release a version?
Yeah, so it's been 2 years since, actually, has it been 2 years? Yeah, it's been a bit more than 2 years since we released version 1.0. And the way that actually I can remember that is that we release on a monthly basis. Of course, if there's a bug or something like it, we'll have a patch release more frequently than that. But normally, all of our minor releases, like version 1.27, version 1.26, we release once per month a minor version, and then we'll have patch releases for bugs whenever customers report something to us. Yeah, and for the roadmap, sorry, I forgot the previous question. For the roadmap, if you go to our projects, we'll have a Copilot roadmap over here. We try to keep this up to date. And the way that we prioritize things is we both listen to customer feedback on GitHub. So for example, you can see that, sorry, if I go back to the Copilot CLI, one of our most upvoted questions is EC2 support, blue-green support, blue-green deployment support, as well as EC2 launch type. So our goal this year, hopefully, is to support EC2 launch type, part of our roadmap, besides Fargate. Yeah.
Very, very nice. Thank you very much, Efe. Are there any other questions coming from the audience? Because I haven't seen very much on chat. There was actually one which came in. Do we have any experience with AWS Copilot with third-party systems like Azure DevOps or CI/CD? Are there any kind of plugins that you can use for third-party tools?
Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with Azure DevOps, but we have a lot of customers that are using GitHub Actions along with the Copilot CLI to do their deployments. So you don't have to necessarily use the Copilot pipeline command to create a continuous delivery pipeline with the AWS Code Pipeline service. You can use GitHub Actions directly. And I think if I were to search on GitHub, not in the repo, but directly typing like Copilot deploy command or something like it, you'll find some examples of people using it in the Git repositories.
GitHub Actions, probably.
Yeah, in some GitHub Actions. Yeah, so I remember finding several before.
But essentially, as we said, Copilot is a tool which interacts directly with ECS. It also has the options of provisioning pipelines, but it doesn't interact with third-party tools like Azure DevOps, or you can call those tools from Azure DevOps to run a Copilot command, but it won't be able to interact with the third-party tool today.
Yeah.
Okay. Efe, I want to thank you very, very much for your time. This was amazing to see all the new features and functionality. I love the diff option. Really, really nice. It gives a lot of of course, because also I use CDK diff as well, so it gives a same kind of feel, good look and feel, and it presents to our customers a visual representation of what's actually going to change, which makes their life a lot easier to understand exactly what's actually happening. So thank you very, very much to you and the whole team for all the awesome work that you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I just wanted to say that our last deployment that we have done just finished. So you can see that I went on my browser and I visited. If I go to the admin subdomain, I can see that the coffee shop got 2 visits.
2 visits. It's a busy site. I hope you make a lot of good
coffee. It's a busy site,
though.
yeah. Definitely need to add some auto scaling over here.
Cool. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, and so you can get a notification for any of our upcoming shows which we have in the future. Thank you very much, Efe, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Hope you all have an amazing day today for the rest of your day and rest good of your week. And we'll see you on the next Containers on the Couch.
See you next time.